Have you ever heard of divorce papers being filed without consent? I had heard of it, but I always thought it was something that wouldn't concern me. Glad I divorced someone with no money and sick. That was until I received such an email while hospitalized due to the stress from my husband's infidelity. It was only after this that I, having divorced as I had hoped, took what I had in hand and headed to the bank immediately after being discharged. All to make my former husband, an elite bank employee, pay for his infidelity. My name is Courtney. I am a handmade artist, married to Tom for 6 years. We were happy together, having met as colleagues at the bank, but recently our marriage had been strained. For about 6 months, Tom began coming home late and became glued to his phone at home. He used to talk on the phone inside the house, but then he started going out to the car to talk. Suspecting an affair, I decided to hire a detective agency after much deliberation. It cost some money, but I thought it would be worth it for peace of mind. A month after hiring them, I found out about Tom's affair. His lover was a woman named Michelle, a teller at the same bank. From the report, it seemed she continued to approach Tom even knowing he was married. The report included photos of them entering a hotel, kissing on the street, and enjoying meals together. I couldn't give up on Tom. I believed his affair was just a moment of folly and that he would return to me. Wanting to be an even better wife, I changed my hairstyle, put on makeup, cooked with more effort, and always smiled. But all my efforts went unnoticed, and the days when Tom wouldn't touch his food increased, pushing me into deeper stress. I had resolved not to confront him, but seeing him leave the house happily on the phone every day made it impossible to hold back. You seem busy lately, getting a lot of calls. Is work so demanding that you need to handle it even after you come home? Yeah. You quit the bank to marry me after working there for about 2 years, right? You might not understand, but it's a busy season now. It's easy for you, isn't it? No busy season, no earnings. Just a leisurely life as a handmade artist. Tom laughed at me in a way that seemed to mock me, and I was shocked by his behavior. The Tom I knew before would never have said such things about my work, nor would he have laughed at me through his nose. He used to praise the pieces I made and supported me through my late-night work sessions. You don't have to say it like that. I might not be as busy as you, but I take my work seriously. I'm not living leisurely at all. I don't know how much you're earning, but it's definitely less than me, right? I'm paying half of everything: rent, utilities, living expenses, so you can live. It's tough being a woman with no earning power. You wouldn't survive if I divorced you. What kind of thing is that to say? I make enough to cover my share. But that's not the point right now. What? Do you want to divorce me? Unable to control myself after hearing the word divorce from Tom, I started crying uncontrollably. Tom sighed, annoyed, and left the living room after telling me not to cry over every little thing. Tom's attitude towards me became even colder the next day. He completely ignored me, not even meeting my gaze. Despite the situation, I kept wondering how we could go back to being the happy couple we once were, putting immense stress on myself, leading to sleepless nights and spontaneous tears. Unable to bear it alone, I met with my high school friend Sophia for advice. Sophia, still single, was a successful career woman. I tearfully shared my feelings with her that I couldn't share with anyone else. Tom is completely infatuated with that woman, Michelle. He comes home later and later. I don't know what to do anymore. Do you still love your husband, Courtney? Do you want to get back to how things were before? Upon being asked by Sophia, I honestly expressed my feelings. It's stupid, but I still love him. I don't want to give up, but everything is so hard. Just then, I started coughing violently and bent over. I've had asthma since before, and it had worsened due to the stress from my relationship with Tom. I took out my inhaler, but I was coughing so much that I couldn't inhale at all. The relentless coughing made me suffer unbearably. Unable to remain seated, I collapsed onto the floor. Courtney, are you okay? Please, someone call an ambulance. Sophia called out to me desperately, but I couldn't respond and lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Courtney. Thank goodness you're awake. Are you okay? Can you understand me? When I looked toward the voice, I saw Sophia with tears in her eyes. Attempting to speak cautiously, I managed to utter, "Thanks." Despite coughing, expressing my gratitude with just a single word. Sophia nodded while crying and immediately pressed the nurse call button to summon a nurse. Then, the attending doctor arrived and explained that due to the severity of my asthma symptoms, I would need to be hospitalized for about a week. With nothing prepared for a sudden hospitalization, Sophia bought me a hospital admission set from the shop and filled out the necessary paperwork. I tried to inform my husband about my hospitalization, but couldn't reach him. Sophia tried calling Tom's cell phone, but he didn't answer. Considering contacting my workplace, I hesitated, fearing their reaction. Eventually, Sophia helped me draft an email, which she sent on my behalf. Sophia stayed until the end of visiting hours and then left. I drifted in and out of sleep due to the medication, constantly checking for any messages from Tom. The first message from him came at 1 a.m. "If you're hospitalized, there's nothing I can do. I'm busy with work, so I won't visit you." Upon reading that email, I felt truly sad, hurt, and miserable. It wasn't just that Tom said he couldn't come because he was busy, but that he wouldn't come at all, which made it clear to me that he no longer had any love for me. I thought I shouldn't cry, but tears came uncontrollably, beyond my will. I didn't reply to the email and just cried until morning. 2 days passed. Tom didn't visit, but Sophia diligently showed her face after work. "That's great. You look a bit better. Are you able to eat? I brought your favorite novel." How much Sophia's lively visits and smiles saved me, I can't thank her enough. "Thank you. I'm feeling quite good today. My cough has settled down a lot. The doctor said he'd consider discharging me in about 2 more days." Sophia was really happy and planned for us to go out and eat something healthy after my discharge. As Sophia and I were discussing where to go, I received an email notification. "Glad I divorced a broke sick person." Reading the email from Tom over and over, I couldn't understand its meaning and just froze with my phone in hand, my heart racing and my mind in turmoil. "You don't earn much, do you? Falling sick without doing any serious work? Don't make me laugh. Wife lottery, a big failure. So, I've filed for divorce. Take care." Seeing the follow-up email, I laughed unconsciously. It felt like a farce. Getting divorced by Tom while hospitalized for asthma. Tears came along with laughter, and I found myself crying and laughing. Seeing me like that, Sophia shook my shoulders in a panic. "What? Courtney, what happened? Are you okay? Hey. Hey." I handed my phone to Sophia, showing her the emails from Tom. Reading the message, Sophia's face turned red with anger. "Look, Courtney, I know you love your husband, and I didn't want to say anything, but maybe it's time to let go?" I understood what Sophia meant. Even though she started crying from the emotion, she managed to put her words together. "Just divorce him, Courtney. You need to take care of yourself. No matter how much you love him, sorry to be blunt, but you can't be happy with such a shitty man." Sophia looked sorry, knowing it was not her place to meddle in marital affairs, but I smiled back at her. "It's okay, really." I knew it deep down. That it was impossible to continue. But I lacked the courage to divorce, always looking away. But it's over now. I'll divorce Tom. When Tom brought up divorce, I was afraid of the separation. I still loved Tom and was scared of how others would react to our divorce. But once I made the decision myself, the fear of divorcing somehow disappeared. I think it's because I could finally think, "Enough, let's give up. That's the way to go. Let's do it. Let's enjoy being single again together." Yeah. I feel so much better. Thank you, Sophia. Having you here, I'm really grateful. Courtney, you're my precious friend, of course. Wait, but how did he manage to file for divorce? Where's your signature? Sophia's anger flared up again when I explained. When we got married, we prepared divorce papers, just in case. It was silly, but we agreed to try to talk through anything and overcome any crisis as a couple. Well, that didn't work out, did it? I could laugh about it, but Sophia didn't seem amused and sighed in disbelief. I see. So, he just pulled those out, filled in his part, and submitted them. It might not be a forgery, but it's still appalling. I was afraid of being divorced by Tom in such a state, so I had hidden them in the room. He probably found them and submitted them. Now, I'm actually glad he did it. I couldn't decide to divorce Tom because I still loved him, but now it's different. As Tom's feelings for me have vanished, so have mine for him. I'm not foolish enough to keep loving someone who does this to me. Tom still sent one-sided messages. You probably don't have any property, and I don't want to give you any of my money, so we're not dividing any assets. The house is in my name, so get out. I'm being kind by giving you until the end of the month. I don't want to bump into you, so I won't return until after the month is over. Make sure you clean the room before you leave. Honestly, at this point, I was in a "what is this guy even thinking?" state, and the sheer selfishness made me laugh again. I showed the email to Sophia, laughing. Look, Sophia. Now I've lost the house too. What should I do? Going back to my parents is too far. I had no intention of staying in that house, and there were my valuable handmade parts to consider. Transporting them would probably fill an entire room. The right size, security, rent. Could I find a perfect place that quickly? While I was pondering, Sophia smiled. Have you forgotten where your best friend works? Don't worry, dear customer. I'll find the perfect room for you. Sorry, I really forgot. That's right. Sophia, please help me. I thanked Sophia. Sophia works in real estate, a pro at finding places. I decided to leave everything to her, a capable woman. Sophia then brought various property listings to my hospital bed, spreading them out and explaining them to me until my discharge. We managed to find a place close to my preferences, which was a relief. Since I needed certain documents I couldn't get until after discharge, I decided to stay at Sophia's place in the meantime. I'm really sorry. I keep causing you trouble. It's okay. I have good sales, right? I've been here second longest after the manager. Sorry, rental agreements take time because there's a lot of paperwork and an inspection process. You can stay at my place as long as you need until everything is settled. Thank you so much. If there's anything I can do, just let me know. Just take care of yourself for now. Let's take it easy. So, how have things been? Any more contact from your ex-husband? No, not a single word from him. After all, we're strangers now. I do get messages from people from our bank days, though. Apparently, I was branded as a terrible wife. It seems that my ex-husband, Tom, had reported our divorce at his workplace and blamed me for it. He told people I didn't do housework, didn't contribute financially to the household, yet splurged on my hobbies. He said that any attempt at discussion would end with me getting hysterical and uncontrollable. It's laughable at this point. Who does he think he is to say that? I'd love to remind him who was the one cheating. Sophia seemed to have reached a point where all she could do was laugh. So, what's your plan? You're not going to let this end here, are you, Courtney? What are you going to do? Grinning mischievously, Sophia looked at me, and I couldn't help but smile back. There was no way I was going to let this end here. Tom had his turn doing whatever he pleased, but now it's my turn. Of course. I have no intention of holding back against a man without sincerity and a woman who meddles with a married man. I have quite a few things in mind, so look forward to it. Just you wait, both of you. Enjoy your peaceful newlywed life while you can. I had already started planning my revenge against the two of them. 2 days after my successful discharge, Sophia drove me straight to the bank where my ex-husband Tom and his new wife Michelle were. Upon entering the bank, I saw Tom in the back. It had been a while since I last saw him. About a month and a half had passed since I was hospitalized and he filed for divorce. I thought I would be furious seeing him, but I wasn't. Then, looking for Michelle at the counter, there she was, sitting there with a composed face although she had taken my husband away. I took a number and waited for my turn. Fortunately, I was called to Michelle's counter. She greeted me with a "Welcome," and I responded with a smile. "Hello. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'd like to cancel a bank account." "Certainly. Is it just one account you wish to cancel? Here we go." I took a deep breath and projected my voice. "No, not just one. I'm here to cancel accounts for all 800 employees of my company." The counter buzzed with whispers at my declaration. Tom looked over, shocked at what he saw. He seemed to want to say something, his mouth opening and closing. "All 800 accounts?" Michelle was flustered at the counter, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of laughter. Canceling 800 salary accounts would be a significant loss for the bank. It's not just about losing deposits. With interest rates being low, banks count on transaction fees and salary transfer fees for their profits. Losing that is a big deal. "Yes, all of them." "Please proceed." As I handed over the corporate account documents, I made my request. "What the hell are you doing, Courtney? Did you just say something about a company? 800 employees? What's that about?" Tom approached the counter. His behavior caused a stir among the other customers in the bank. "Oh, long time no see. How have you been?" "What do you mean?" "It's exactly as I said. I've been a company president. Even when I was married to you. It's a handmade business, so I'm both an artist and a president." I spoke the truth at the counter. "You're a president? What? I didn't know that. You never said anything about that when we were married, did you?" "No, I didn't say. You used to mock me for being a failing handmade artist, right? I earn more than you do. I didn't want to hurt your pride, so I kept it to myself." Michelle, who had no idea who I was, looked at me in shock. She whispered softly, wondering if I was really the person she thought I was. "Hello. I'm his ex-wife. Please proceed with the cancellation quickly." Tom and Michelle were frozen, not knowing how to react to the unexpected situation. Then, I heard a familiar voice. "Miss Courtney. It's been a while, you seem well." There stood Mr. Johnson, my boss before I married Tom. He was a strict person, and many of my peers found him difficult, but I liked him. He was as strict with himself as he was with others. When I got married to Tom, he tearfully wished me happiness. "Mr. Johnson. It's been too long. You look well too." For a moment, I forgot why I was there, happy to see Mr. Johnson. "Yes, I'm doing well. Tom told me about the divorce, and I've been worried about you. It seems you've been through a lot. How about we talk in the back room while we wait?" Of course, these two and I will be there. Glancing at Tom and Michelle, Mr. Johnson's gaze was sharp. It was probably about my divorce and Tom's remarriage to Michelle. Their faces, which were red a moment ago, turned pale. They seemed to be having a busy day, changing colors like that. I don't mind at all. I'd love to catch up with Mr. Johnson. Great. Let's go to the reception room on the 3rd floor. You two, come along. We headed to the 3rd floor where the customer reception room was located. Mr. Johnson opened the door for us, and we entered and took our seats. "It's really been a long time, Mr. Johnson. I feel regret for meeting under these circumstances." I spoke honestly, and Mr. Johnson smiled back. "No worries. I was surprised by the situation, but I'm glad to see you're doing well." I was shocked to hear about the divorce from him, and even more so about his quick remarriage. Mr. Johnson glanced at Michelle and continued. And I don't believe the divorce was your fault, as he claimed. Wait a minute, Mr. Johnson. Are you implying that we're to blame? Is that not the case? If I'm wrong, I apologize. But you see, I've taught her about work for several years. She was always organized, the most meticulous when it came to cleaning, and if I recall correctly, she used to bring homemade lunches every day, right? As Mr. Johnson asked me this, I was honestly surprised. It was years ago, but the fact that he remembered these details so precisely made me feel appreciated for my efforts. Not doing housework, not contributing financially to the household but spending on hobbies, and becoming hysterical during discussions. That's what you've been spreading around as the reason for divorce, but Courtney is not like that. Hearing Mr. Johnson defend me so firmly brought tears to my eyes. It felt overwhelming to have someone who understood. But that's the truth. You only know her from a work perspective. And you might suspect we had an inappropriate relationship, but that's not true. Yes, that's right. I never cheated. I just couldn't stand seeing Tom so down after his divorce, and while I was cheering him up, he proposed. The two of them laid out such blatant lies in front of Mr. Johnson. Michelle even argued her point with tears, like a tragic heroine. Ridiculous. I was the one who was hurt. I took out a document about the thickness of a notebook from my bag. Would you like to see this, Mr. Johnson? You too can look as well. Oh, but perhaps there's no need. You're probably well aware of what's in it. I handed over the investigation report from the detective agency to Mr. Johnson. He took it while smoothly dodging Michelle's attempt to grab it with a scream. Sit down and be quiet. At Mr. Johnson's stern command, Michelle shrieked and clung to Tom. What is this? You said your wife was too stupid to notice anything. This is not what you told me. Michelle, it's not like that. She really is stupid. I never thought she would do something like this. Calling people stupid too much, aren't you? Just as I was about to retort, Mr. Johnson's furious shout exploded. The idiots here are you too. Cheating on your wife, Tom, and you, Michelle, getting involved with a married man. Playing the victim? You two are the offenders, and Courtney is the victim. Thank you for saying everything I wanted to say. It feels refreshing. But may I add something? Of course. Say it. I won't stop you. Grateful for Mr. Johnson's strong support, I felt empowered. He nodded at me vigorously and began reading the report with intense focus, his frown deepening. You called me stupid, but do you think a stupid person can run a company? It turns out you were the one with the lesser income. How much was your salary again? It's $100,000. That's plenty. Tom was so proud of his $100,000 salary, which seemed hilarious to me. Michelle nodded along, seemingly proud as well. Is that so? Well, it's not bad. But mine is $400,000. I have 800 employees, and it's only our 4th year in business. The handmade business you looked down on? I started a company with my friends. $400,000. $400,000. Tom and Michelle's faces were priceless. The information that the person they underestimated was actually a company president earning $400,000 was too much for them. Yes. Business is booming, so we're planning to hire more staff. I thought it would be beneficial to have our employee accounts with your bank, but there's no need to be considerate anymore. So, I'm canceling them all. Wait. Just wait a minute. If you cancel, the bank's deposits will decrease, and having salary accounts means potential for housing mortgages and such. It's a big loss for the bank if you cancel. It seems he forgot that I used to be a bank employee. The basic knowledge that any bank employee would have, he's making it sound like a revelation. Yes, I'm aware. It's basic knowledge for a bank employee, isn't it? Are you underestimating me? Why should I be considerate of an ex-husband who cheated and filed for divorce while his wife was hospitalized with asthma? And these two seemed to forget something crucial. I made sure to remind them. And, you had an affair within the bank? Do you really think you can continue on the elite path as if nothing happened? You too, Michelle. By the time I looked at Michelle, she had already started crying. Tom, looking down in frustration, suddenly prostrated himself. Please. I'm sorry, forgive me. It was just a fling. A fling. You understand, right? She came on to me strongly, and, well, I just went along with it. Michelle screamed at Tom's words. What do you mean by that? Am I the one to blame? You're the one who said there was no love left for your wife, that things weren't working out. Michelle clung to and shook Tom. The drama that unfolded before me was so cheap that I couldn't help but laugh. Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Are you kidding me? What value does such a prostration hold? Especially when you have no value to begin with. Mr. Johnson took over, his voice dripping with disdain. Exactly. Having seen incontrovertible evidence, I'll make sure you are punished accordingly. Your affair has led to the bank suffering the disadvantage of a mass account cancellation. You seem well aware of the disadvantages of account cancellation, so I assume you have no objections to the punishment? As Mr. Johnson posed the question, Tom could only hang his head low, while Michelle cried out loud. I wished they would stop playing the victims until the very end. Leaving their fate in Mr. Johnson's hands, I left the room. By the time our conversation ended, the account cancellations had been completed, and I left the bank feeling refreshed. Later, Mr. Johnson informed me that both had been dismissed for their misconduct. Their affair had resulted in a significant loss of accounts for the bank, which was deemed to have a substantial negative impact. Unemployed, the two struggled to find work, unable to pay their apartment's mortgage, and being turned down when asking friends for money. Interestingly, Tom kept sending me messages and emails begging for reconciliation after divorcing Michelle, all of which I ignored. The laughably pathetic emails were forwarded to Sophia, and we enjoyed a good laugh. I also filed for compensation through a lawyer. Tom had the audacity to claim that since I started my company after our marriage, its assets should be divided between us. Unfortunately for him, the assets in the company's name are exempt from division. I thought divorce would be difficult, but working hard post-divorce has made me realize how happy I am. I even wish I had divorced sooner. Humans are strange creatures. With plenty of money to spend freely and no grievances, I've decided to live my life valuing myself more from now on.
You should have my kid ASAP. Even if it comes from someone I've cut ties with, it's not pleasing at all. In fact, it's disgusting. Besides, it was Nick who filed for divorce on his own. Thinking it's too late for him to act so entitled, I remained silent, which somehow made Nick laugh out loud under some misunderstanding. You just can't do without me, huh? What? I'm already remarried though? What? I couldn't help but laugh at Nick's bewildered voice. I never thought you were such a slut. His words don't affect me at all. I simply told him, don't contact me ever again, and hung up the phone without waiting for his response. Christina, what happened? Actually, when I told Scott about the phone call, he immediately agreed to take care of it. It seems there was another call from someone else, and they planned to handle it together. Looking forward to the retribution against those two who hurt me, I started making tea. My name is Christina Owen. I'm a 35-year-old housewife. I remarried about 5 years after divorcing my ex-husband. Now, I'm a mother of 1 child. Since my marriage life with my ex-husband was the worst, I feel very happy now. I met my ex-husband, Nick, at the reception of a trading company where he approached me, and we started dating. Many around me were getting arranged marriages, but my parents wanted me, their only daughter, to have a love marriage and supported my relationship with Nick. After receiving my parents' approval, we got engaged quickly. And about a year into our relationship, we registered our marriage. Nick was somewhat authoritarian but generally kind, and our marriage was going well. However, about 6 months after registering our marriage, Nick's attitude changed completely. "Hey, food." "What?" I was confused by his sudden demand. Just yesterday, it was, "What's for dinner?" or "What should we eat for dinner?" As I wondered how to respond, Nick raised his voice in irritation. "I'm hungry. Hurry up and serve the food." "Huh, but I haven't even started yet." Useless woman." "Forget it." "Where are you going?" Ignoring me, he put on his shoes and left swiftly. I stared blankly at the door he slammed shut. Did I do something wrong? I tried to recall recent events, but couldn't understand why. Eventually, Nick returned the next morning, immediately took a shower upon arrival, and secluded himself in the bedroom. It was actually my birthday that day, and we had plans to go out for a meal. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything about it and started doing housework instead. "Hey. The vacuum cleaner is too loud. Are you doing this on purpose?" "No, it's just that since we're not going out today, I thought I'd clean up." "It's your fault we're not going out." "I have a headache, keep it down." "I'm sorry." Looking back, it was clearly Nick who was in the wrong, but at that time, I was convinced that I had upset him and was to blame. And as Nick realized this, he became even more tyrannical. "This food is terrible, make it again." "What? You got a problem with that?" "No, not at all." "Sorry." Being criticized for every meal and cleaning, I was exhausted. Yet, I loved Nick and believed he would become kind again. That's why I strained myself every day to do the housework. But that wasn't good. "You're like a mannequin, so boring." One day, Nick spat that out and left. When he returned, he proudly declared to me, "I cheated on you." "Why?" "Because you don't satisfy me." "Got a problem with that?" "But we're married." Nick glared at me upon hearing my words. Then, he started yelling with a face like a demon. "You got a problem with what I do." "It's not that, but..." "It's not but..." "Don't you even know to honor your husband?" Nick slammed his hand against the wall forcefully. Intimidated by Nick, who was 7 inches taller than me, I completely shrank back. Then, suddenly, Nick spoke to me in a soothing voice. "I don't want to do this either. If only you tried harder." "Right. I understand, I'll try harder." "That's right. A husband's affair is because of the wife's failure." Hearing that made it feel true, and I nodded in agreement. Since then, Nick would easily lash out at things whenever he was displeased. And afterwards, he would always explain it to me in a soothing voice. "I'm doing this for you." I was completely trapped by Nick's words, blaming myself for everything and unable to escape from this cycle of self-blame. Then, one day, Nick brought home a young woman. "She's pregnant with my child, so I'll be living with her from today." "What do you mean?" As I asked, confused, the woman answered with a triumphant look. "That means since I'm pregnant with Nick's child, you're no longer needed. I, Isabella, married Nick, and I'll be living here from today." Suddenly being told she would live here, I couldn't comprehend. Pregnant? Married? All these things came at me at once, and I was completely confused. I am the one married to Nick. We are not divorced. So why does this woman claim to be married to Nick? To this, Nick began to loudly explain. "I'm tired of you, and I've already filed for divorce. Be thankful to Isabella for writing it on your behalf." Thankful. What should I do about the divorce? I don't care, though I'll keep you as a maid if you want, Nick said, smirking. At that moment, I finally woke up. That's fine. I'll leave by today. Going back to your parents? Make sure you say it was all your fault, okay? No, I'll tell everything exactly as it happened. Hey, wait. Ignoring Nick's attempts to stop me, I took only my belongings and left the house. When I arrived at my parents' house, they were shocked and asked me what happened. I told them everything without holding back. My parents listened to the end and were angry with me. Together, we went to a lawyer at my father's company and demanded compensation from Nick and Isabella. Of course, both Nick and Isabella refused. But since Nick had filed for divorce on his own and then remarried, and with a baby on the way, they couldn't escape the situation. In the end, we demanded $50,000 from Nick and $40,000 from Isabella. They both paid in full, which meant they probably had to borrow the money. But that was none of my concern. I started working again on my own. At first, I considered going back to being an office worker, but since I enjoyed housekeeping, I started taking housekeeping jobs privately, thanks to my parents' connections. Initially, I had 1 or 2 clients, but thanks to word of mouth, I started getting requests every day. One of my clients was Scott Owen. He was a wealthy man who traveled the world alone, delivering supplies to children and teaching them. He was rarely home, only a few times a month. So he gave me the keys to his house and asked me to clean. I initially refused, but after being repeatedly asked by someone referred through an acquaintance, I agreed to clean his house a few times a month. Eventually, Scott asked me to clean even when he was in the US. Scott, who prefers simplicity, turned out to have a lot in common with me, and we often had engaging conversations. After about 2 years of this lifestyle, Scott said something I hadn't expected. I've fallen for you, Christina. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind? Excuse me. Scott was handsome and smart, so I thought there must be better women out there for him. That's why I initially refused. However, Scott didn't give up and kept asking me out on dates. I still remember how happy he looked when I accepted for the first time. Eventually, I went on more dates with Scott, and after the 4th date, when he formally confessed, I agreed to start dating him. He quickly introduced me to his parents and openly declared that we were dating with marriage in mind. My in-laws were very kind people who didn't mind that I was divorced and treated me well. About a year into our relationship, we got married. Then, 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant with our first child. Our marriage life was so smooth and peaceful that I decided to quit my job, albeit reluctantly, and focus solely on housekeeping at home. Scott, who was already capable of doing household chores, often helped me. Moreover, because we were expecting a child, Scott decided to stay in the US. However, he wanted to continue his activities. So he established an organization and became its president. He incorporated the organization and set up a company in the US to support children overseas. The happiness of you and our baby is my top priority. Scott always said that, and he also treated my parents with great care. I felt incredibly happy every day, something I couldn't have imagined during my marriage with Nick. Now that the compensation payments from both of them were completed, I rarely thought about them, but one day, I received an anonymous call on my phone. Scott was not home at the time, so I initially didn't answer. But the persistent ringing forced me to pick up. Hello. Christina? Who is this? It's me. You haven't forgotten about me, have you? I felt a chill down my spine at his tone. Unbelievable. Why would he call now? I can't understand the reason. Nick? That's right. Good old Christina. I wasn't pleased at all to be praised like that. I wanted to end the call quickly and urged him to get to the point. What can I do for you? You're being so formal. Nick cheerfully shared his recent happenings. However, none of it mattered to me. This has nothing to do with me, right? Don't be like that. You've reflected by now, haven't you? Reflected? I repeated myself, utterly baffled by the conversation. Just then, Scott came home. I gave him a look. At that moment, on the other end of the phone, Nick, sounding pleased with himself, finally got to the point. So, if you've reflected, I'll take you back. Take me back? You should have my kid ASAP. Hearing this from someone I've already severed ties with does not please me at all. In fact, it's disgusting. Besides, it was Nick who filed for divorce on his own initiative. Thinking how presumptuous he was being, I stayed silent, which made Nick laugh loudly under some misapprehension. You just can't manage without me, can you? What? I've already remarried though? What? I couldn't help but laugh at Nick's bewildered voice. I never thought you were such a slut. His words don't affect me at all. I simply told him, don't contact me ever again, and hung up the phone without waiting for his reply. Christina, what's wrong? Actually, when I told Scott about the phone call, he immediately agreed to handle it. It seems there was another call from someone else, and they planned to deal with it together. Looking forward to the retribution against those two who hurt me, I started making tea. A few days later, our lawyer came to visit. He had helped with the divorce and now represents not only my father's company but also Scott's. When I told him about what had happened, he agreed to take immediate action. While discussing with Scott and the lawyer, my phone rang. I exchanged looks with the two of them and placed my smartphone on the table. Answering the call on speaker. Christina. Yesterday was so sudden, I got confused. But you can't sulk and lie. You're not really remarried, because I'm still here. His selfish interpretation made me sigh. I felt embarrassed to have ever liked such a man. Sensing how I felt, Scott chuckled and took over the call. It's no lie. I am Christina's current husband. Huh? What are you talking about? Christina, you should just call the police on this deluded guy. It's neither a misunderstanding nor a joke. We are truly married. We've registered our marriage. Scott spoke calmly throughout, while Nick became increasingly irritated. To him, I made my stance clear. What he's saying is true. I'm remarried. So, please don't contact me anymore. So you're sulking? Someone told you to say that? No. If you want, our lawyer here can explain it to you. As soon as I mentioned the lawyer, Nick clicked his tongue in annoyance over the phone. Then, he tried to command me with a frustrated voice. Then just divorce him and come back. I'll forgive you if you apologize properly. I'll come to pick you up tomorrow. Nick's utter lack of understanding gave me a headache. Then, the lawyer spoke up calmly. Nick, you do realize there's a restraining order against you approaching Christina, right? Any contact would immediately result in damages. What? That's expired, right? That's not how it works. It's still very much in effect. Finally, the lawyer's words seemed to cut Nick's momentum. However, Nick then tried a softer approach to persuade me. Come on, Christina. You'd be happier with me, wouldn't you? Is it really completely out of the question? It's impossible. Because, you see, I have a child now. What? A child. Nick seemed to be shocked and fell silent on the phone. Scott then declared, adding insult to injury. I can make Christina happier than you ever could with your selfish, domineering ways. We will never divorce, and she will never return to you." I nodded in agreement and held Scott's hand. Then, while Nick remained silent, I hung up the phone. For about 2 weeks, there were no calls from Nick. Just when I thought he had given up and felt a sigh of relief. One day, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I wonder who it is. I went to the intercom and was shocked. There were Nick and his affair partner, Isabella. I had heard rumors that they had split, but it seemed they were still connected. While pressing the record button on my smartphone, I responded, "You're supposed to stay away. If you have money, return the compensation." 5 years can change a person, I thought naively, but hearing Isabella's words, it seemed they had come to our house with money in mind. My having money and returning compensation to you don't really connect. It's the same. You just want money. No, that's not quite. Why are they so arrogant when they were the ones in the wrong for cheating? I was perplexed. Then Isabella began to explain her situation unasked. I'm engaged. To a manager at my company, a really nice guy. I can't tell him about my debt. You understand, right? Congratulations on your engagement. But what does that have to do with the compensation? I genuinely didn't understand, but it seemed my attitude only infuriated Isabella further. She started getting angry even through the intercom. That's why. Just return the money for the debt, and we'll call it even. You're not struggling for money, are you? I heard you're rich. Isabella's hysterical shouting made me fear. Although they couldn't enter due to the auto lock. I wondered what I would do if they tried to force their way in through a window. As I was thinking this, Isabella screamed even louder. And how did you even get such a handsome man? He suits me better, so give him to me. I'm sorry, but a husband isn't something that can be given. I know that much. Right after my reply, Isabella retorted, and Nick burst out laughing behind her. It might have been funny, but it was rude. Then, Isabella turned her anger towards Nick. It's your fault for not having money in the first place. Nick retorted, annoyed. You lied about being pregnant. That was a misunderstanding. What? You were so sure of yourself. The two of them completely forgot my presence and started arguing. So, the pregnancy was a lie. I felt as if a thorn in my heart had been slightly removed. Just then, a police officer appeared on the intercom screen. This is nothing. No, officer, this is just a small argument. They started making excuses, but the police officer didn't buy it and took them away. I collapsed at the intercom. Sigh. I'm just glad they didn't get in. Are you all right? It turned out that Scott was the one who had called the police. Actually, I had contacted Scott before answering the intercom. He had told me to record the conversation and that he would be home as soon as possible. Sorry for bothering you when you're busy, and thank you. Your safety is the top priority, don't worry about it. I felt reassured by Scott's dependable presence. I was truly glad I had remarried him. I felt this from the bottom of my heart. Since the lawyer had informed the police about the restraining order, Nick and Isabella were thoroughly reprimanded. However, now the lawyer started receiving daily calls demanding the return of the money. It seems we need to settle this once and for all. After receiving a call from the lawyer, Scott and I decided to confront Nick and Isabella directly. When we relayed through the lawyer that we wanted to meet, Nick and Isabella happily agreed, probably thinking they were going to get money. We prepared thoroughly and awaited the day of the showdown. On the day, my parents also came, having been informed beforehand. Upon arriving at the designated location, Nick and Isabella were already there, along with my former in-laws. My former in-laws glared at me as soon as they saw me. Thank you all for gathering today. Let's begin the discussion. At my signal, everyone looked at me. I placed 2 papers on the table. They were invoices for the penalty due to violating the restraining order. Nick and Isabella's eyes widened upon seeing them. What's this amount? We can't possibly pay this. The paper stated a penalty of $30,000 each. Nick and Isabella started complaining, and then my former mother-in-law spoke up. Aren't you getting a bit ahead of yourself, Christina? Excuse me? I was confused by her question, and she laughed mockingly before starting to speak. We've already paid the compensation for the affair. Demanding more money. I thought wealthy people were more magnanimous. But you seem quite petty. Petty, you say? She was essentially saying to drop the current claim. However, I had no intention of doing that. While we might not be struggling financially, this was a penalty for not adhering to an agreement. Nick and Isabella had a clear obligation to pay. I explained this to my former mother-in-law, but she was not convinced. You were once our daughter-in-law, after all. To make such a fuss. I can't imagine doing that. Nick and Isabella nodded in agreement with her, their opinions aligning, making them oddly bold. I sighed and played the recording from the other day. My former mother-in-law's face turned red upon hearing it. Scott then pointed it out. Oh, are you embarrassed? A man almost in his 40s. Getting into trouble with the police in front of his ex-wife's house. I'd be too ashamed to show my face if I were you. My former mother-in-law glared at Scott but seemed unable to come up with a comeback. Grinding her teeth in frustration. I felt I had to say something and opened my mouth. Well, it's good nothing was damaged. It would have been quite serious if something like a statue had been broken. That cost about $800,000, after all. $800,000. My former mother-in-law turned pale at my words. Nick and Isabella were gaping. That's when I finally realized. I realized I had never mentioned my parents' assets to Nick. You know, my parents' total assets are around $29 million. So, it's not a big deal, but if it came to compensation, Nick and Isabella would really struggle. $29 million. You're kidding, right? Why would I need to lie? Seeing my serious demeanor, Nick, realizing I was telling the truth, hung his head, pale-faced. Isabella, who had been watching silently, suddenly brightened up and turned to Scott. Then, Scott, you must be quite wealthy too, aren't you? What? Scott showed clear disdain, but Isabella, undeterred, continued. Indeed, Scott's total assets were similar to my parents'. However, that had nothing to do with the current discussion. So, why don't you divorce such a demanding wife and marry me instead? I'm pretty, and I'd look good in a dress. Isabella was indeed young and beautiful, something to be envious of. However, Scott looked at her coldly. No matter how beautiful you are, I will not be swayed. My wife is the most beautiful and dear to me in the world. It was somewhat embarrassing to be praised like that in front of everyone. As I blushed, Isabella glared at me resentfully. Then, I remembered something and shared it with Isabella. By the way, I met an acquaintance of Scott's recently. Who happens to be the president of your company, Isabella. When he asked about you, I mentioned that you were Nick's remarried partner but soon divorced. What did you say to him? I just told him the truth, that you were once married to my ex-husband. But divorced shortly after. Isabella's eyes widened, and then she burst into tears. I was just being honest, yet I felt the need to add one more piece of advice. Isabella, I heard you've been unfaithful again. That's not good. You should also be honest about your marital history. Or you won't be able to build trust with your partner. What have you done? Huh? I merely shared the truth. I replied with a smile. When Nick brought Isabella into my life, I was deeply hurt. This little payback seemed fair. Just then, Scott's phone rang. He answered and after a brief conversation, hung up and addressed Isabella. I just got a call from the president, asking to inform you that your engagement with his son is off. No. No. Isabella screamed and collapsed onto the table. It was a pitiful scene, but it didn't really concern me. We look forward to your payment, then. At that moment, my former mother-in-law pressed on. Because of you, Nick will be in debt again. Don't you feel bad? Yeah. Don't you feel any guilt? I pondered for a moment. Guilt? I had simply done what was necessary. Emotion didn't really come into it. Then, I remembered something else I hadn't mentioned. Oh, right. Nick's company was bought by my husband's company. He'll be attending the next audit report meeting. Please be prepared. That can't be true. I don't lie, you know? Right? I looked to Scott for confirmation, and he nodded. Seeing this, Nick slumped, defeated, unable to say another word. However, my former mother-in-law still tried to argue. At that moment, my former father-in-law, who had been silent, spoke up. Christina, I'm truly sorry. Please let me apologize on behalf of the two of them. He said this and apologized. I was taken aback by the former father-in-law's gesture. Throughout my marriage, he had always been critical of Nick's actions and the former mother-in-law's snide remarks. He was the one who insisted that the compensation be paid in full, even if it meant taking on debt. Thus, I harbored no ill feelings towards him. Please, don't apologize. Let me apologize. It's the least I can do. As he apologized, my former mother-in-law looked on in disbelief. I'll make sure the compensation is paid in full, even if it means taking on more debt. And I'm divorcing your mother. Divorce. Why? I can't stand your lack of common sense anymore. My former mother-in-law turned pale and clung to him, but his decision was firm. And she eventually hung her head in defeat, just like Nick. Handle your divorce on your own. We just need the payment agreement signed. Understood. Now, both of you, sign it quickly. Under the former father-in-law's stern voice, Nick and Isabella reluctantly signed the payment agreement. My parents, Scott, and I confirmed the signatures before standing up to leave. Just before exiting, my parents spoke up, having listened quietly until then. Wasn't irreconcilable differences the reason for your divorce? Indeed, our values couldn't be more different. So, let's not have any further involvement, please. Our daughter, who was hurt by Nick, is now very happy. If anyone intends to disrupt this happiness, be prepared. Touched by my parents' love, I felt tears welling up. Scott, holding my hand, gave me a reassuring smile. We left the rest to my former father-in-law and departed. Afterward, the restraining order fines were successfully deposited. I wondered how they managed to come up with the money, but it didn't really matter. It seems Nick got fired from his job following an audit. Rumors suggest his dismissal was due to inappropriate behavior with female colleagues during work hours, slacking off, and generally being incompetent. Despite appearing competent at work during our marriage, it turns out he had been dumping his responsibilities on his juniors, who eventually got promoted, leaving him sidelined. As a result, he was the first to be recommended for early retirement once his performance evaluations turned poor. Nick apparently accepted the early retirement, but his severance pay was swallowed up by debt repayment, forcing him to look for another job, according to rumors. However, companies in the same industry were reluctant to hire him. and he ended up working part-time at a store to make ends meet. Isabella's engagement was indeed broken off, and further affairs came to light, leading to more compensation demands. Unable to cover the compensation payments to me and her fiancé, Isabella ended up quitting her job to work in a nightclub. Known for leveraging her femininity, I wondered if she would continue to do so. However, it turns out that at 28, she's already considered old in the nightclub scene, where she hardly makes any money due to the lack of customers, forcing her to take a part-time job during the day. While part of me feels sorry for her as a fellow woman, I also believe it's a case of reaping what one sows. My former father-in-law did indeed go through with the divorce and came over to greet me once. He wished me happiness, and I was able to express my gratitude. He's now returned to his family home and is dedicating himself to farming, hoping he stays healthy and active for as long as possible. As for my former mother-in-law, after the divorce, she moved in with Nick. Having never worked a day in her life, Nick is now responsible for all living expenses. My former father-in-law mentioned that she is quite the spendthrift, and the household is often filled with her shouting, painting a rather tumultuous picture of their daily life. I recently gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Scott is completely smitten and has been a great help, allowing me to rest properly. He even took paternity leave, making our day-to-day life much easier. Our discussions about future plans, including travel, fill me with joy. My parents are absolutely smitten with their first grandchild, bringing new toys with each visit. Recently, the abundance of toys led us to remodel a room into a toy room. Scott and I have been discussing taking a trip abroad once our child is a bit older. With each day filled with excitement for the bright future ahead, I truly feel like the luckiest person. Christina, it's time for feeding. Coming. Today, since Scott is taking care of everything except nursing, I've been able to enjoy some reading time. After drinking some decaffeinated tea, I got up and headed to the living room. There, I found our child crying while arched back like a shrimp. And Scott, despite being a bit overwhelmed, had a happy expression on his face. "What are you laughing at?" "Oh, nothing." Saying that, I took our child from Scott and began to nurse. There's this strange feeling that this happiness will continue on forever. It's bright outside. Once nursing is finished, let's go for a walk, just the three of us. I shared this thought with Scott and smiled. I've got a new wife and a child on the way. I was at a loss for words after John's announcement. Then, the woman next to John said with a laugh, "I'm already 7 months pregnant." So, I told him to get a divorce and get out before the baby is born. The woman made a shooting gesture. At that point, I was truly angry. Rejecting it here would only make me miserable. That's when I thought it might be better to just, and then Alex chimed in. "Divorce? That's not going to happen." "Huh? Why not?" I was surprised not by the woman's question, but because Alex turned to me. Without a moment's delay, Alex whispered a certain truth to me. So that's what it is." If that's the case, I can understand why Alex would say that. But if what Alex says is true, there's no need to agree to a divorce right away. Taking it slow would make both that woman and John suffer more. Considering he cheated and even had a child, it's only fair to get back at them a little, right? While I smiled inwardly, I bit my lip and looked seriously at John and the others. "My name is Nancy. I work for a company that sells health food products. I'm in charge of call center operations. Despite handling complaints, the pay is on the lower side. It's a job where stress accumulates more than savings. Thankfully, my husband John, who works for a trading company, earns a decent income. That's how we manage to live." if I were alone, I might have quit a long time ago. I'm 44 years old, and my son, Alex, is in high school. Considering Alex is looking ahead to college, it's a costly time. Despite these challenging times, John has had to go on a solo assignment. However, after a year of solo assignment, John's promotion is guaranteed. Plus, he will live in an apartment rented by the company during his assignment. It's just a year of endurance, so I have to focus on saving. If we can get through this now, a better future is surely waiting. That's what I thought lightly. Of course, it's lonely without John. But I'm not at an age to say such things. Even before marrying John, it was common for us not to see each other for days. Our meeting came through a friend's introduction. It was at a friend's wedding where we were introduced to each other. And that's how we started dating. But even from the start of our relationship, John often had to leave home for business trips. We can go on a date this week, right? Sorry. I've been asked to go on a sudden business trip. What? Another business trip? John would soothe me when I frowned like that. This happened over and over again. John works for a trading company and has clients all over the country. Therefore, during busy periods, they run short of hands. I've been told this many times. So, at that time, I resigned myself to the situation. Then, let's go on a date when you get back. I'm really sorry. I'll make it up to you for sure. And, about the house, can I ask for your help again? You're still not good at household chores, John. John was away on business trips. And it was my job to take care of the household chores he had accumulated. This became so routine that I got a spare key shortly after we started dating. But I was thrilled about it. The spare key was a sign of trust and a symbol of being a couple. However, we ended up getting married while still in such a relationship. Because of that, John left all the housework to me. He didn't seem to help even on holidays. Even after our son Alex was born, nothing changed. I tried to get him to help with child rearing at least. But he refused, saying he was tired from work. I was disappointed, but he was serious about his job. He properly contributed financially to the household. When I talked to my friends about it, they said that's how most husbands are. I wonder if I'm wrong to want my husband to help with household chores. Nowadays, it's natural to say that husbands should help with household chores. But back then, that wasn't the norm. Men worked outside, and women took care of the home. It was a world where such excuses were still accepted. So, I ended up doing all the housework and child rearing alone, as John asked. Talking this way might make it seem like my marriage was a failure. But I don't think so. There were good things about being married, too. Especially good was that John's business trips drastically decreased. One reason was that John's boss was considerate. Another was that my colleague was the boss's wife. Apparently, after hearing my story, the boss's wife spoke to the boss on my behalf. That really reduced John's business trips. But John seemed unsatisfied with that. I feel like I've been sidelined at work. They were just being considerate, weren't they? That's true, but it's not like I'd be of any help with household chores, right? John furrowed his brows. I looked away slightly and answered. Wouldn't it be fine if you gradually learned to do household chores? But still. He didn't seem convinced. Reluctantly, I decided to wait and see. However, John never attempted to help with the household chores. Instead, as he started spending more weekends at home, he took up golf on his own. Why golf? Weren't you told by your boss to help out with the chores? Well, that's true, but my boss and clients play golf too. He started to twist logic, saying it was necessary for work advantages. If you're just going to play golf, I'll tell the boss's wife again. What? Tattling again? Because you won't help me. Shut up. Don't complain. You can live because I'm working, right? John raised his voice, and I was taken aback. He used to be so kind before we got married, but now there's no trace of that kindness. Though, on my salary alone, we'd barely make ends meet. But there are things you can and can't say, even if they're true. I had to make him understand that. With that thought, I resorted to a bit of a forceful approach. The next month, I reduced John's allowance. Reducing my allowance, why? We need to save for Alex's education. And eventually, we want to build a house, don't we? But that doesn't mean you have to reduce my allowance. John raised his voice. I frowned and retorted. Then help out a little with the chores. That way, I can work more and earn a higher salary. Well, that's... John faltered. In the end, he silently accepted. Sometime later, John handed me a bank book. Here, I'm giving this to you. A bank book? Is this for saving up to build a house? Yes. I've been saving money on it. I'm entrusting it to you, so can you give me back my allowance? John said sulkily. I opened the bank book while glancing sideways at him. There was already about $1 million saved. I was astounded. Really? You saved up this much? Of course. I too want to cherish you and Alex. Thank you, John. Overjoyed, I jumped on John and promised to restore his allowance in the momentum. But all this was John's strategy. I only found out about it much later. However, this incident greatly changed our relationship. We began to cooperate in building our house. That doesn't mean John started doing housework. He just cooperated with my savings. He agreed to take lunches I made and to reduce eating out as much as possible. He also cut down on his golf sessions. Naturally, I also made various sacrifices. Through our mutual efforts, we managed to save enough money to build a house in just a few years. By the time the new house was completed, Alex had become a middle school student. He worked hard in both club activities and studies, achieving top grades at school. His teacher said he could go to one of the top high schools in the prefecture, and even aim for a national university in the future. I was truly happy. Then, just after Alex started high school, John came home from work and started talking solemnly. Nancy, sorry to spring this on you, but I've been assigned to work alone. Solo assignment? Why? Actually, John was being promoted for his work performance, but a one-year solo assignment was a condition for his promotion. The company would provide a place to live, so only living expenses were needed. However, we had just built our house a few years ago. With the mortgage still outstanding, it was a challenging time. His boss had told him to discuss it with his family. Needless to say, I was torn. The mortgage was significant, and we couldn't afford to live apart. Traveling on weekends would be a significant expense. But enduring 1 year would mean a promotion and financial ease. John looked eager to go. So, despite my hesitation, I supported him. It's just 1 year. We'll manage. But there's also the house mortgage. It's okay. I'm working too. Thank you, Nancy. That's how I sent John off. But once we were apart, there were surprisingly many difficulties. Often when I tried calling, John wouldn't answer. You didn't answer the phone yesterday, what happened? Sorry. I was working overtime. Are you okay? Any troubles? I'm fine, no issues. The problem is I don't have time to clean my room? John laughed shyly. I sighed in frustration. Then, how about I come over and help clean on your next day off? No. That's okay. Suddenly, John became flustered. Something felt off. I thought to myself instantly. Do you have something to feel guilty about? No, it's not that. It's just a waste of transportation money, right? John let out a forced laugh. I felt something was off in his reaction. Is he hiding something? Or perhaps he has a reason for not wanting me to come. My thoughts raced, but the first thing that came to mind was infidelity. If he's on a solo assignment, he's out of my sight. And he might think it's okay to let loose a bit. I'd forgive him if he just visits places with girls, laughing it off. But infidelity is a different story. That, I cannot forgive. Despite the murky feelings, without any evidence, I left it at that for the day. Yet, the unease in my heart didn't vanish. I spent my time feeling uneasy. As nearly a year was about to pass since John started his solo assignment, I came home from work to find the lights on unexpectedly. Alex should be late because of his club activities. Then who could it be? With caution, I opened the front door. John's familiar shoes were there, but also a pair of women's shoes I didn't recognize. A bad feeling washed over me. I rushed to the living room. Welcome back, Nancy. John was there in the living room. Next to him was a young woman I didn't know. I'm home, and who is this? Just then, Alex's voice came from the entrance. I'm home. I'm starving. Alex hurried into the living room and then stopped dead in his tracks upon seeing John and the woman. You have guests? Sorry, should I leave? Alex offered to leave considerately. But John stopped him. No, there's something I want both of you to hear. So, stay here, please. Okay, then. Alex seemed to sense something and glanced at me briefly. Trying not to show my turmoil, I nodded with a smile. In the midst of this, John began to kneel and blurted out. I've got a new wife and child on the way. I was at a loss for words at John's declaration. Then, the woman next to John said with a laugh, I'm already 7 months pregnant. So, we need to divorce before the baby is born, and you need to leave. The woman gestured as if to shoo me away. Naturally, I was infuriated. Resisting would only make me feel miserable. Just as I was thinking of giving up, Alex interjected. Divorce? That's not happening. Why? How come? I was surprised not by the woman in front of me but by Alex's words. Without hesitation, Alex turned to me and whispered a certain fact. I see. That makes sense why Alex would say that. But if what Alex says is true, there's no need for me to agree to a divorce right here. Taking things slow will make both that woman and John suffer more. After all, he cheated and even had a child, so a bit of payback is justified, right? While I inwardly laughed, I bit my lip and looked seriously at John and his company. Do you even understand what you've said? When I asked, John nodded quietly. John has a family with me and Alex. Yet, he says there's a new wife and child. This can't be right. So, what are we then? I gave John that look. Then, the woman started to complain. Just leave already. You're in the way. Would you mind not butting in? This is a family matter. Huh? I am family too. Look, I have his child. The woman caressed her stomach. I retorted sharply. Excuse me, but what was your name? Me? Emily. And who are you? Emily sneered with a snort. As if you need to ask, but I answered anyway. I'm Nancy, John's wife. Wife? You won't be needing that title anymore. Why is that? Because you're being dumped by John. Emily laughed loudly. Meanwhile, John looked pale. Setting that aside, something became clear from our conversation. Emily has been pressing John for a divorce. Indeed, John mentioned having a wife and child but never said he wanted to divorce me. Well, even if he hasn't said he wants a divorce, a husband who cheats and fathers a child is unacceptable to me. I've been thinking that divorce is the only option. But as Alex said, now is not the time for divorce. We'll divorce after thorough preparation. That's the best course of action. As I pondered, my irritation grew. I couldn't take it anymore. Reaching my limit, I told John, I need some time to cool off, so please leave. No, but surely you understand you're the one at fault here, right? Or do you intend to make things worse? With a stern look, John averted his gaze. Then, hastily gathering his things, he somewhat forcefully made Emily stand. Emily, for today, let's. Huh? You said we'd divorce. Or are you not planning to take responsibility? No, it's not that, just for today. John forcefully led Emily to the entrance. Then, with an apologetic bow, they left. After the two were gone, I collapsed in relief. Mom, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. Contrary to my words, my heart felt heavy. Sensing my feelings, Alex took out his phone. Should I call Grandpa and tell him Dad betrayed us? Betrayed might be too strong a word. When I cautioned Alex, he frowned displeased and retorted sharply. But Dad has borrowed money from Grandpa, saying it's for Mom. That's right. Can you tell me that story again, in more detail? So, Alex's story went like this: when I reduced John's allowance. He tried to improve my mood to get his allowance back to the original amount. That's when he came up with the idea of building a house, something I had mentioned offhandedly. However, we didn't have savings for such an undertaking. In his dilemma, John consulted with my father. Consequently, believing it was for my sake, my father lent John the money. Thank you. I will repay you. It's for Alex, so don't worry about it. Just pay it back slowly, without overburdening yourself. That was the conversation between them. However, my father was concerned about John's actions right after leaving his house. Right after leaving, John was on the phone with someone, presumed by my father to be a woman. Considering the possibility of trouble, he thought of a precaution. And if anything happens, let me know, that's what Grandpa told me. Perhaps John had already been cheating by then. Such thoughts crossed my mind. Nonetheless, I understood what Alex meant. But I had plans of my own. To carry out my revenge, I told Alex, "Can you wait a bit before reporting it? I have a plan." "That's fine, but don't worry. I'll report back." Alex reluctantly nodded, granting me time to enact my revenge. The first thing I did was stay put in the house. Emily seemed eager to move in quickly. So, I deliberately decided to stay in the house to irritate her. As expected, Emily called in frustration. "How long are you going to stay there? Just leave already." "Why should I? This is my house. The house is in John's name. Not yours." Emily raised her voice. Naturally, I recorded all of it. When divorcing, this recording would undoubtedly be useful. That was my thought. Yet, Emily didn't seem to care about such things. She raised her voice as if threatening or unnecessarily loud. "Come on. Leave already. You're no longer needed. I won't leave until we're divorced. I told you to leave before the baby is born." Emily yelled louder than ever. I audibly sighed in response. "If that's all you called for, I'm hanging up." But the conversation isn't. Emily started to say something, but I hung up. Finding it bothersome, I immediately blocked her number. Perhaps annoyed by my response, Emily took drastic action. The next day, as I was leaving the house as usual, a strange smell wafted towards me. What's this smell? Like garbage. I covered my mouth with a handkerchief and stepped outside the gate. Instantly, I was taken aback. Unbelievably, there was garbage scattered in front of the house. Passers-by also frowned at the sight. What is this? Muttering to myself, Emily's face flashed in my mind. A show of force, then. Clenching my fists, I went back inside the house. I grabbed cleaning supplies and started cleaning immediately. If that's how you want to play it, I'll make my next move. Forced into an unexpected chore before work, I was deeply infuriated. However, my next move would take time. While I was preparing, the garbage continued to be scattered. Moreover, graffiti was even sprayed on the walls of the house. Cleaning up became my daily routine. Meanwhile, exhaustion kept piling up. If this continues, it might affect my work. That's how far I was pushed. Thus, I reluctantly decided to move. I hate to say this over the phone, but Alex and I are leaving that house. Is that okay? John's voice sounded cheerful. Needless to say, it irritated me. Huh? What's there to be happy about? We're being harassed, you know? Right. I forgot. Regardless, make sure to settle things. To my words, John responded with a dazed voice. Settle, what exactly? You have something to say to my father, right? Come to my parents' house this Sunday, okay? Speaking in a slightly lower voice, John didn't reply but hung up the phone. Then, on Sunday, John came to my parents' house alone. He was extremely nervous, his face pale. As John sat down, my father began to speak. Long time no see, John. It's been a while, sir. I've heard from Alex about the new wife and child, is that so? Asked by my father, John looked down. I had only told the truth. Yet, looking down meant he was aware he had done something wrong. Why are you silent? Say something. My father raised his voice, and John kneeled on the spot. I sincerely apologize for what has happened. It's all due to my inadequacy. No need for excuses. Did you cheat? Answer clearly. Yes, I'm sorry. John prostrated himself as if trying to rub his forehead on the floor. Even my father seemed to have had enough. Don't mess around. I agreed to your marriage because you said you'd cherish her. Yes, I apologize. Enough. No more excuses. For now, let's have you return the money. My father placed the loan agreement signed by John on the table. At that moment, John flinched. What's wrong? That was the agreement, wasn't it? But I don't have the means right now. Then you'll have to borrow it. There are plenty of places to borrow money from, right? John's gaze darted around at my father's words. According to my father, John owed $1 million. Certainly not an amount easily prepared on short notice. But he sowed the seeds himself. He'd have to find a way to prepare it somehow. I watched the exchange with a grin on my face. If you can't prepare the money, you should just sell the house. I could buy it from you. Dad is a pro in real estate, managing apartments. He wouldn't have trouble finding a use for the house. But John will never sell the house. Because if he did, Emily wouldn't stay silent. There's no way out of this, huh? I watched how things unfolded with a laugh in my heart. Eventually, John promised to borrow money from his parents and pay Dad back. As John was leaving with his shoulders slumped, I stopped him. Then, I handed him some documents. This contains evidence of your affair. Just to be sure, check it. When I said that, John got annoyed and raised his voice all of a sudden. What are you trying to do now? I'm going to demand alimony, that's why. You'd say, there's no evidence. If you don't check. I wouldn't say that now. John threw the documents away. I picked them up. Even if you don't say it, Emily, was it? She seems like the type who would. Emily has nothing to do with this. She does. Because I'm going to demand alimony from her too. John was shocked at my words. What was he surprised about? Demanding alimony from an affair partner is quite normal. He didn't understand anything. I was appalled. Anyway, I forcefully handed the documents to him and pressed the point. Decide who will pay the alimony, and have a proper discussion between you two. I tapped John on the shoulder. At that moment, his shoulders heavily dropped. Later, Emily complained to me. Even coming to my workplace. Of course, the security guard kicked her out. Just before being escorted out, Emily said something. Remember this, greedy woman. I wanted to say, that's you. Taking someone's husband, their house, and everything else. Nonetheless, I have no lingering feelings for John. I'd like to give him away with a gift bow. Anyway, I'm demanding alimony through a lawyer. All procedures are being legitimately carried out, so there's no reason for complaints. No matter how much Emily complains, John, scolded by Dad, likely has no will to argue. You've lost. I was laughing in my heart. However, the situation took a drastic turn. About a week after Emily came to the company, my phone rang right after work. A call? I wonder who it is. It was an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something felt off. So, I answered the call. Tentatively speaking to the caller. Hello. The police. The person on the phone claimed to be a police officer. I listened to their story in a fluster. According to the officer, Alex got involved in some trouble on his way back from school. There were no injuries. But he seemed to be in the middle of a dispute at a family restaurant near the high school. They wanted me to come as well. Understood. I'll be there immediately. I rushed to the family restaurant. Upon arrival, I was guided to the office. While bowing my head to the clerk, I entered. In the office, there were Alex and several high school students, as well as a police officer. I'm sorry for the trouble. As I bowed my head again, suddenly someone sitting on the sofa stood up. You. What kind of education are you giving your son? Emily. There stood Emily. Emily approached me, to my surprise. Your son stole my wallet. Emily raised her voice. That's when a police officer stepped in and separated us. Then began to explain the situation from the beginning. Alex had exams coming up and had invited several friends to study together. They started looking for a place to study. Initially, they considered the library, but it was closed. So, they came to the family restaurant. With permission from the store, they started a study session at a table in the corner. They were studying quietly, so the store did not see it as a problem. However, about an hour after they entered, a loud voice of a woman echoed through the store. When the staff rushed over, the woman was making a fuss about her missing wallet. That woman appeared to be Emily. In any case, the staff listened to Emily's story. Emily claimed that her wallet went missing while she was in the bathroom. So, the staff checked the surveillance cameras. But there was no one suspicious around. While discussing this, Alex returned from next to their table. Alex had also gone to the bathroom. The moment Emily saw Alex, she started causing a commotion again. She hates me, this guy is the culprit, and so on. Alex, what's going on? Sorry, but I don't know anything. You say that, but did Emily see you? As I pressed for answers, Emily smirked and pointed at Alex's bag. I didn't see it. But it's a fact that my wallet was in there. Shocked, I turned to look at the police officer, who nodded solemnly. Of course, I don't believe Alex would do such a thing. But a wallet doesn't just get into a bag by itself. I looked back at the clerk, seeking help. The clerk shook his head and explained the situation. According to the surveillance camera angle, only the bags placed next to each other by the individuals could be seen. Moreover, both Alex and Emily were rummaging through their bags just before going to the bathroom. Essentially, the surveillance camera only captured the two back to the camera, rummaging through their bags placed next to each other with a time difference. Even if Alex reached for Emily's bag, it would look like he was just searching through his bag. That was the explanation given. This situation suddenly put Alex at a disadvantage. There was nothing I could do. Just as I was about to give up, a group of high school girls entered the office. One of them handed her smartphone to the police officer. Actually, I was filming. Filming? I exclaimed loudly, startling the high school girl. Mom, don't scare her. Amy is easily frightened. Oh? You know her?
Yeah.
She's in my class. She filmed it because that woman sat next to us, just in case. Alex took Amy's smartphone and showed the recorded video to the police officer. Wait a minute. Emily panicked, but the officer gently held her back. Look, that woman is putting it in my bag. I see. Trying to frame him. The officer glared sternly at Emily. Emily, avoiding eye contact, said, "It seems I was mistaken. Regardless, please tell us everything." No, I'm busy, and I'm pregnant. While this conversation happened, I confirmed the footage on Alex's smartphone. Emily was seen putting her wallet into Alex's bag. It seemed to be Emily's own doing. Relief and anger surged through me simultaneously. Go quietly for questioning. Shut up. It's none of your business. It is my business. You're the one who vandalized our house and scattered trash. The officer's expression changed at my words. He said the same, but do you have any evidence? I've hired a detective, and just the other day, we gathered all the evidence. I showed the officer the photos I had taken of the documents given to me. As the officer reviewed them, I offered, "Would you like me to hand over the investigation documents? I also have recordings of her verbally abusing me." The officer nodded firmly. Subsequently, Emily was taken to the police station. I submitted the detective's investigation documents and audio recordings. As a result, Emily was arrested on charges of property damage, among others. Although she denied the charges, the evidence was against her. Currently, she's trying to negotiate a settlement through my lawyer to reduce her sentence. Meanwhile, John, who had been allowing Emily to come and go from his house, apparently started receiving cold stares from the neighbors. It's only natural since he tried to drive me out and took in Emily, who ended up getting arrested. Eventually, John could no longer stay in the house and moved back to his parents' home. Well, I think it's just the right occasion for him to repay the debt he borrowed from his parents to pay back my father. He must be getting an earful from his strict parents right now. Just imagining that makes me burst into laughter. On my end, life has gotten a bit more vibrant. That's because of the incident at the family restaurant. Actually, at that time, Alex shyly introduced Amy as his girlfriend. Since I had just gotten divorced, I thought Alex might keep his distance from marriage or relationships. So, it truly made me happy to see that wasn't the case. He has grown up properly. I need to grow into a better mother as well. Of course, I can't say I've fully recovered. But if I were alone, I'd still be down. I'm really glad to have Alex. I'll keep doing my best for him. Every day, whenever I see him in the kitchen, I feel strongly motivated.
My name is Sandra Brown. I have been married for 5 years, and I have a 3-year-old daughter. My husband is very dedicated to his work and never takes a day off, even when he is not feeling well. Thanks to this, I think we are able to live a peaceful life. I have a younger sister who is 3 years younger than me. She got married about 3 years ago, but had trouble conceiving a child. Both my husband and I were worried about her as she seemed a bit down. Then, we received the news that she was pregnant. From that moment until the birth, we supported her as a couple. When we heard the baby was born and went to the hospital, my sister's husband was there and looked very happy. "Oh, where's the baby?" Upon entering the hospital room, Tom was the first to speak up. Indeed, there was no sign of the baby next to Amy. "Yeah, this hospital takes the babies to the nursery to give the moms a break. They only bring the babies for feeding times. Ah, that must be convenient. The food is delicious, and they take good care of you. I'm really glad I chose this hospital. Maybe I should have my second child here. Sis, are you planning on having more kids?" Well, it would be sad for her to be an only child, wouldn't it? I said this while looking at my husband, but he didn't seem to hear me and was not looking at me. His attention was entirely on my sister. Amy really did a great job. She carried the baby for 9 months. I've seen how hard it's been for her and am just filled with gratitude. My sister's husband, Fred, is a business owner. Because of his busy schedule, he was hardly able to care for my sister. It must have been very stressful for her, not being able to see her husband much, even though he was there. That's true, Fred, you were hardly ever by Amy's side. This remark made me wonder because it sounded like he was criticizing Fred. I'm sorry. I was so caught up in work. No matter how busy work is, you should be there for your wife, especially during pregnancy. It's going to get even more challenging with child rearing. However, when I was pregnant, he left everything to me. I thought, something is odd. Amy really did a great job. It must have been tough. Tom said so. I understood he was trying to be considerate of my sister, but it made me feel uneasy. Then, it was time for nursing, and the baby was brought from the nursery. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the baby brought in by the nurse. My husband had a big smile on his face looking at the baby. Fred did too, but it seemed more than that. I thought, why? He didn't seem this happy or moved when I gave birth. He didn't show this much emotion for our daughter. It felt like he was moved as if it was his own child. However, he didn't show this much emotion towards our actual daughter. Far from being moved, he hardly came to the hospital due to work and barely visited after she was born. I wondered if he didn't want to see his child even though he was busy. Other dads came every day to take photos and laugh with their wives. Our home had none of that. I thought. But now, what's with my husband? He was acting like a husband to my sister, even though Fred was there. It was as if he was taking Fred's place. Watching my husband, memories came flashing back to me. It started way before we learned of my sister's pregnancy. Whenever Fred mentioned he had to work late, Tom would also have to work late. Whenever Fred had a business trip, Tom would have one too. The timing always seemed too coincidental. When both our husbands were away on business, I suggested going out with my sister, but she declined, claiming she was busy. I wondered if she preferred to spend her free time with friends. However, when my husband returned home, he was unusually kind to me. He would bring home sweets he never usually bought or offer to massage my shoulders when I mentioned they were sore. But it never went beyond that. Doubts arose, but I dismissed them as overthinking. However, watching the two in front of me, those doubts resurfaced. In my mind, I kept repeating, something's not right, something's not right. He's not drinking well. Amy was breastfeeding openly, despite her brother-in-law being present. Fred looked uncomfortable, as one would expect, not wanting his wife's breasts exposed to even a family member. Yet, Tom looked on happily and naturally. I thought, isn't it normal to be a bit shy or look away? Am I the only one who thinks this way? Watching the baby drinking milk, Tom then asked, is this child a boy or a girl? Indeed, I hadn't asked about the baby's gender yet. A boy. A boy? He's going to be a handsome guy. Tom exclaimed, pleased. I wondered if he had always wanted a son. Unexpectedly, I blurted out. Yes, he looks just like you. What? The atmosphere felt frozen. Yet, it was Tom who broke the ice. Silly, what are you talking about? There's no way he looks like me. Exactly. That's impossible. Is that so? I think he resembles you quite a bit, especially around the eyes. That's impossible. Don't say weird things. Oh, really? Despite their outright denial, something about their reactions seemed suspicious. Fred, upon hearing such remarks, scrutinized the baby's face closely, clearly deep in thought. Following this, Tom's return home became increasingly late. Why are you always so late? Where have you been? Harboring nothing but suspicion, I asked him about it. Unashamedly, my husband replied, I'm going over to Amy's to see the baby. Huh? Aren't you supposed to be busy with work? Yeah, busy. And yet you have the time to go there? You always said you were too busy with work to help with our child. Our child is a girl. Amy is a boy. There's a big difference. So, he's visiting because it's a boy? That's a strange reason. Don't you think Amy gets tired with your frequent visits? No way, she's happy to have me over. Oh, so, Amy is. Hey, don't speak ill of Amy. Despite my husband's defensive attitude, I thought he wouldn't be able to visit as often once my sister was discharged from the hospital. However, it seems he's been visiting daily. Did you go see Amy and her baby again today? Yeah, I did. You have to see him every day, you know. They grow up so fast at this stage. You never cared about our child's growth like this. It's only natural to be interested, even if it's my sister-in-law's child. It's weird that you don't want to go see them. Really? But don't you think you're going a bit too often? Are you jealous? That's pathetic. It's strange not to want to see a child that my sister went through so much trouble to have. Justifying his actions, my husband seemed to have a reason for everything. But when I saw lipstick on his shirt and his pants worn inside out, my trust faded. I thought, he's cheating. But with whom? Is he meeting another woman under the guise of visiting my sister? Or could it be my sister after giving birth? No, that would be too cruel. Yet, all signs inevitably pointed towards my sister. I was losing my mind. Then, I received a call from my sister's husband, Fred. Sandra, I need to talk to you about something. Can you spare some time? His voice sounded serious, so I went to meet him. Sorry to make you come out here. I thought it would be bad if your husband was at your house. So, Fred had the same suspicions? Amy and your husband have been acting strange. My husband too? What do you mean? Ever since she was discharged, your husband has been coming to our house. Whenever I get home, he's there. I was happy at first, thinking he really cared about our child. But it seems like there's more to it. What do you mean? When I come home, it feels like they just separated. There's this awkwardness. Your husband says he's just there to see the baby, but his gaze always ends up on Amy. I wouldn't mind if it was just about the baby, but it doesn't seem like it. It turns out Fred noticed too. I just listened without responding. He even comes over when I have days off now. I was shocked. I thought he was working those days. He seems to be avoiding my gaze, like they're hiding something. I thought. I understand that feeling. He's really good with the baby, which surprised me because I didn't expect all parents to be like that. But my husband has never changed a diaper or fed a baby's milk. He'd make a face whenever I asked. Recently, I overheard them talking while changing the baby's diaper. They sounded so close. Not like that, you're so clumsy. Sorry, Amy, I'll get better. It sounded too intimate. I thought. They're definitely in a relationship. I hate to think this way, but I can't help but suspect. Do you feel the same? I thought. Of course, I do. I'm convinced of it. I think you're right to suspect, but without proof, there's not much point in speculating. You're right. Then, how about hiring a private investigator? A private investigator? Yes, I'll even pay for half. If they find nothing, then we'll be fine. I see. Yes, that makes sense. So, we decided to hire a private investigator to gather evidence of whether Tom and Amy were having an affair. About a week later, a large envelope from the detective agency arrived. Inside, as I had suspected, were the details of their affair. I wasn't even angry, just thought to myself. Bingo. But now, there was much to do. I immediately contacted Fred and set our plan into motion. The following weekend, with my husband in tow, we visited Amy's house. Sis, here to see the baby? That's unusual. Tom visits often, but I thought you weren't interested. Where's the baby? Sleeping right now. Well, let's go in then. Please, come in. Upon entering the living room, Fred was there, offering a polite nod, which could have been mistaken for a simple greeting. Coffee okay? You drink coffee, right, Tom? Yeah, I'll help. Oh, then let me. No need, Fred. Just sit down. It'll be faster if I help out. I thought. What does that mean? He knows his way around here too well. Watching Tom's actions, I felt anger rising. At home, he never made coffee himself, always expecting it to be served. Yet, the chatter from the kitchen sounded like that of a happily married couple, causing both me and Fred to frown. Once the coffee was served, Amy broached the subject. What brings you here today? It can't just be to see the baby, right? I thought. Correct. Exactly, Amy. Exactly, actually, we have a wonderful present for you and Tom. What? For me and Fred, you mean? No, for you and Tom. I then spread out the documents from the detective agency on the table, displaying photos and detailed reports of Tom and Amy's meetings. What is this? What's the meaning of this? Then Fred shouted. Were you two having an affair? I thought. Perfect. Just as planned. With the evidence laid out, both were shocked. Tom, what's this about? What's wrong with being close? We're just in-laws. But the issue was the nature of their closeness. The photos clearly showed intimate moments that no mere in-laws would share. Look closer. In this photo, we're just leaning in together because we are both looking at the baby. And here, it might look like we're hugging, but actually, right, a cockroach appeared and Amy got scared, so she clung to me. Such blatant lies. He has a story for every single photo, but expects me to believe them? But why conduct such an investigation in the first place? Don't you trust me and your own sister? I thought. Trust you? No way. I've always treated your sister like my real sister, and I've taken care of her. How can you think it's okay to suspect us like this? Don't you think it's unfair to your sister being doubted like this? He was the one doing unfairly. How dare he continue to lie at this stage? What are you talking about? You say my sister is to be pitied, but weren't you both involved in the affair? So, you're both equally to blame, aren't you? I haven't cheated. I just explained the reason behind each of these photos, didn't I? And yet, you still don't believe me? What kind of logic is that? Who would believe such an ad hoc story behind these lovey-dovey photos? Whether you believe it or not is up to you, But do you intend to ruin my sister-in-law's marriage as well? As Tom spoke with apparent triumph, Fred, finally losing his patience, produced an envelope labeled DNA test results. Actually, I've suspected you and Amy were having an affair too. So, I prepared this evidence. I was willing to seal it if you had admitted earlier, but it seems there's no need for that now. A DNA test. You mean, you don't believe the child is mine? Tom's face turned pale. This was the look of a man completely cornered. Amy, silent and downcast, seemed to realize the gravity of their situation. We used a sample from the child and a toothpick you used at our house for the test. And here are the results. The document showed a 99.9% probability of parentage. This is. Meaning, he's your child, Tom. That's. I thought it was strange. You visit the child every day. When your own child was born, you chose work over spending time with them, or you'd hang out with friends instead. But with Amy's child, you visited daily. It was more about being with Amy than seeing the baby, wasn't it? That's not true. I can't believe this. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Tom continued to deny it. I have a loving family. There's no way anything could happen with Amy. A loving family? Where? What are you talking about, Sandra? Feels like the first time you've called me by my name in years. I only love you. I would never cheat. Are you going to believe some paper over me? Yes, I believe in the power of science over the words of a worthless man. Who are you calling worthless? No, I really do love you. I'm not interested in any other woman. At that moment, Amy burst into tears. That's terrible. Sandra Brown thought. What in the world? Both Fred and I were shocked, but Tom was just as surprised. What's wrong? Amy cried. It's terrible. I love Tom, and he loves me. He was happy when I got pregnant. He came every day, and we loved each other daily. And now you're choosing your family over me? Amy. We promised not to break our families. Amy, how did it come to this with my husband? I was struggling with not being able to have a child. You and Tom were so supportive. Tom visited daily. Fred was always busy, so Tom listened to my concerns. That's when I felt he was the one I could really trust. And that led to you giving yourself to him? Yes. I was happy to have someone so concerned about me. And you slept with him? Yes. You fell for this scumbag's tricks? Yes, I knew it was wrong and thought about breaking it off. But we were too physically compatible. I couldn't do it. Amy, while speaking, seemed somewhat pleased. Tom, listening to her, appeared somewhat proud. I thought. What the heck of these two damn. So, what's your plan now? I believe marriage and love are separate. I want to continue my marriage with Fred and keep seeing Tom. I thought. Are you a monkey? A dog? Just a bitch. Despite being my sister, I couldn't agree with Amy's logic, feeling nothing but disbelief at her foolishness. And you? Tom, smiling happily, shared the same sentiment. With Amy, it's just a physical relationship. Considering we have a child together, I thought maybe we don't need to continue our marital life. So, why not maintain this relationship without any of us getting divorced? Wouldn't that make us all happy? I thought. Are they serious? What's going on in their heads? Are they blooming flowers or breeding maggots in there? Despite the sheer selfishness, I found a strange sense of refreshment in their audacity. I looked at Fred, who seemed to share a similar sentiment, only capable of sighing in response. Well, I'm definitely not interested in continuing this relationship. I'll be filing for divorce, so you all do as you please. Fred quickly agreed. Yeah, I feel the same. Living with such a bitch is impossible for me. I'm divorcing too. What do you mean by such a bitch? Sorry, my true feelings slipped out. But honestly, I can't raise a child that's not mine with the money I've earned. It's utterly unreasonable, so divorce is the only option for me. That settles it then. You all can do whatever you want. Despite expecting satisfaction from both, they vehemently protested. I never said I wanted a divorce. What? If we divorce, how am I supposed to live? Here comes the most self-centered statement ever. Exactly, because my salary is nothing more than a drop in the bucket. And all this time, I've been content with that because I had you, with your high income, to rely on. No, you just didn't want to deal with interpersonal relationships and depended on my salary. Well, yes, you could say that. But what about Amy's child? If she divorces Fred, then the child will be left without a father, won't he? What are you talking about? The real father is right here. I don't want that either. I don't want to marry Tom. The idea of divorcing Fred, who has a high income, is absolutely unbearable to me, and Tom, with his low income, doesn't even register on my radar. So, it seems Tom isn't keen on prioritizing me, nor is he interested in marriage. Quite the candid pair they are. But really, there's no need for me to bother with their self-centered opinions. I can't continue this relationship anymore. After saying this, Fred placed the divorce papers on the table and left the house. I did the same. I presented the prepared divorce papers. Submit them to the office. If you don't, I'll have to hire a lawyer. You probably can't afford to fight this legally, but I can afford to hire a lawyer. No. I won't divorce. Like it or not, Fred has already left the house. You've brought this upon yourself. I won't divorce either. If that's how you feel, then fight it with a lawyer. Though I doubt you can. Saying this, I left my sister's house. However, my return was not to the home shared with my husband, but rather to an apartment I had rented immediately after receiving the investigation report from the detective. I swore to start a new life there with my child. Despite this, the two kept contact and caused disturbances. Eventually, after much noise, they submitted the divorce papers once they realized further resistance was futile. They seemed to think that by submitting the divorce papers, everything would be over and there would be no further claims for compensation. But life isn't that sweet. Having been cheated on, I needed them to feel the same or even greater pain. Thus, I demanded compensation and child support from my husband. They both wailed miserably, but I was indifferent to their cries. Fred and I came to an agreement where he wouldn't demand compensation in exchange for not paying child support. However, this was only regarding Amy. I made sure to claim compensation from Tom. When Amy was in economic hardship, she turned to Tom in tears. Tom then foolishly boasted, "Leave it to me." As a result, they found themselves burdened with a massive debt. Observing their actions, it was noted that they had borrowed money from consumer finance services to pay for both of their compensation charges. However, the borrowed money had to be repaid, leading to a situation where they were financially strangled. Subsequently, the two divorced individuals ended up living together, as if it was the natural course of action. But, with a newborn to care for, Amy claimed she couldn't work, leaving Tom to work alone, struggling to support their difficult life. They even struggled to afford milk and diapers, and Amy would often suggest that Tom should find a higher-paying job. However, Tom, who wasn't good at social interactions, valued his personal relationships at work too much to consider changing jobs. "If you won't change jobs, at least try doing some part-time work." She would tell this to Tom daily. "Part-time work would affect my day job. Mother milk stops coming out at this rate. Then you should work." Your sister, Sandra, worked even after having her child. Don't compare me to my sister. I've decided not to work while my child is young. A happy childhood means having a mother around all the time. But we can't do anything without money. Then you should work. Their nightly arguments led to complaints from neighbors. With no way to repay the borrowed money, they eventually faced legal action. Unable to afford a lawyer, they turned to their parents for help. However, both sets of parents refused, stating that since they chose to be together despite the affair, they should handle their problems themselves. Thus, the daily battles continue, filled only with shouting matches and growing hatred. On the other hand, since the ordeal, I found solace in Amy's ex-husband, Fred. Over time, we became good confidants for each other and eventually recognized our need for one another, starting a relationship. My daughter has also grown fond of Fred, and we are considering starting a life together.
Your fiancé. I saw him and just had to have him, so I stole him from you. Raised in a single-parent household with hardly any memories of being brought up by my mother, I went to introduce my fiancé to my grandparents, who had been like parents to me. Out of nowhere, my mom popped up and checked out my soon-to-be husband like she was sizing him up. Her look towards my husband gave me a strange feeling, but I never expected something terrible to actually happen. My mom just sent me a wedding invitation, and the name on it was the guy I was supposed to tie the knot with until things fell through. How could she have the audacity to take her daughter's fiancé like that? What kind of nerve does she have? With a heavy heart, I decided to go to my grandparents' house. Being alone at home only made me feel worse, and I thought being with someone might help distract me even a little. They immediately sensed something was wrong. After crying my eyes out for a while, I calmed down and showed them the invitation. This is what I received from Mom. Their faces were a mix of disbelief and shock at what their own daughter had done. Then, looking into my face, they nodded firmly.
It's all right. Leave it to us. We'll take care of this. Yes, we'll come up with a wonderful surprise for our daughter.
My name is Jane Hill, a 25-year-old working at a food manufacturing company. I lived with my grandparents from a young age until I started living alone as an adult. Due to my mom being absent most of the time and not having a dad, it didn't really feel like we were living together. My mom, Diane, had me back in high school when she was just a sophomore. Her boyfriend at the time was also in the same grade. When she revealed she was pregnant, he said he wanted her to have an abortion. He was only 17 and wanted to go to college. Raising a child requires money, so he thought he would need to start working immediately after graduation. However, my mother refused to do that. She wanted to have the child she conceived with the man she loved. Her then boyfriend, who didn't want to take responsibility, abandoned my mother and started dating another girl. My mother's belly grew larger, and she couldn't stop feeling nauseous from morning sickness. She became unable to attend classes properly, and even when she could go to school, she would spend her time in the nurse's office. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend was living a normal life, attending classes every day and going on dates after school. My mother couldn't stand it. She wondered how he could act so calmly when she was going through such hardship. Once they split up, she stopped liking him completely and even started hating him. She even began to resent me, their child, before I was even born. However, it had reached a point where it was too late for an abortion, so she had no choice but to have me. Even when looking at me after I was born, she couldn't find me cute at all, as she saw him in me. My mother suddenly told me this when I was a teenager after she came home drunk. You remind me so much of him, especially your eyes. That's why I get irritated just by looking at you. She even said things like that. Not knowing what my father looked like, I couldn't say anything and just had to listen in silence. She couldn't see me as her daughter, so she didn't bother trying to be a parent and wouldn't even say my name. Once I learned the truth about my birth, it all clicked for me. Of course, I was always troubled by my relationship with my mom, but I basically didn't struggle in life. That's because my grandparents raised me with lots of love. They always came to see me at school events, performances, and sports competitions. I remember looking over at my grandparents and seeing them smile and wave at me kindly. Jane, don't your parents come to see you? Only your grandparents? I was asked that a few times, but I wasn't embarrassed. I love my grandparents so much, so I asked them to come. That's why I'm very happy. With my head held high and a smile on my face, I replied just like that. Not only did they come to school events, but they also often took me to places I wanted to go on holidays, like amusement parks, shopping malls, and game arcades. Even now, when I visit those places, memories of going there with my grandparents as a child come flooding back. I was so happy when they found clothes that looked good on me in stores. I found out my grandfather was surprisingly scared of heights when we went to the amusement park. Just thinking about those moments brings a smile to my face. There's no doubt that I've grown up thanks to my grandparents. On the other hand, I hardly have any memories of going anywhere with my mom. She was always busy playing around with a bunch of guys. The term free-spirited fits her perfectly. She's now 42 years old, but looks much younger than her actual age. She could easily be mistaken for someone in her early 30s. That's why she often hung out with men younger than herself. She must have been staying at different guys' places. She would come home only once every 3 months. When I was in elementary school and especially small, it was once every 2 weeks, but as I grew older, she would come home less and less. But to be honest, I feel relieved when she doesn't come back because I don't really want to interact with her. On the contrary, when I come home and see shoes that seem to belong to my mom at the entrance, I feel restless. The smell of unfamiliar perfume and strong alcohol made me anxious. And socks scattered everywhere, bags thrown aside, the sound of someone rummaging through the fridge as if they were a burglar. When I know my mom is home, I head straight to my room. Even if I was hungry, I wouldn't eat until after she had likely gone to bed, past midnight. She wouldn't come to my room, but I knew I would be bombarded with complaints if we ran into each other in the kitchen or the bathroom. Once things got quiet and the snoring began, I could finally take a breather. I'm determined not to become like my mom. I made up my mind around middle school and have been very cautious about relationships ever since. Finally, I found a partner with whom I am considering marriage. His name is Kevin Owen, a man 2 years my senior. We met through a friend's introduction. He's serious and honest, so I'm sure he'll be a great guy for you, Jane. I hadn't had many opportunities to meet new people since becoming a working adult, and being naturally shy about relationship, it took a while for me to find a partner. Initially, I was anxious about meeting someone who I'd never met, but since my friend highly recommended him, I decided to meet him. When we first met, I was impressed by how serious he was. We made plans to meet up after work, and he arrived looking spiffy in a smooth shirt and jacket, with a nicely done tie and straight posture without slumping. It made me think he's a pretty neat and put-together person. He was also very passionate about his work. He spoke with sparkling eyes about being entrusted with a significant project and being expected to advance in his career by his colleagues. It was so clear that he loved his job. His dedication to work, his seriousness, his kindness, and our compatible conversations drew me to Kevin, and I was the one who confessed my feelings. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and about a year, Kevin proposed to me. Of course, I nodded in agreement. I believed that since he had been sincere throughout our relationship, we could live happily even after marriage. Though we are still engaged, we decided to introduce each other to our families. First, we planned to introduce Kevin to my grandparents. Since I didn't have a dad and my mom was hardly ever home, my grandparents were essentially like my parents. I was really uncomfortable explaining it to him since I almost never used the word mom. I thought it was best to just not mention that she was a bit promiscuous. Kevin didn't bring up my mom, perhaps thinking her absence was due to being busy with work. Since he didn't look puzzled, I breathed a sigh of relief. Then the day came when I took Kevin to my grandparents' house. Even though I had started living on my own, I would come back several times a month, so it didn't feel like it had been a long time.
Welcome. Glad you could make it. We've been expecting you. Please come in.
They welcomed him with gentle voices. It seemed to relax him until he rang the doorbell. His body had been stiff, but it returned to normal as we entered. As we headed to the living room, I noticed my favorite cookies from childhood on the table along with some coffee.
Jane has always loved these cookies. Whenever I'd say she could pick out a snack at the supermarket, she'd always choose these. Is that so? Jane actually told me about these cookies, and I've come to like them too.
It was so weirdly funny when Kevin, who I only met as a grown-up, joined in on my chats about old memories from when I was a kid.
So today...
As my grandfather started to speak, Kevin tensed up again. The normally smiling eyes of my grandparents suddenly became sharp, but only for a moment.
Yes, today I'm here to ask for your blessings to marry Jane.
Before he could finish, my grandparents' faces softened again, waving their hands in front of their faces as if to say formalities were unnecessary.
Of course, we have no objections. If Jane chose you, you must be the right one. Yes, we believe you two can build a happy life together.
Hearing this, Kevin expressed his gratitude. The atmosphere lightened, and we spent the time in cheerful conversation. My grandparents brought out an album and started talking about my childhood while flipping through it.
Who is this?
He pointed at a photo. It was taken on my first day of elementary school with a school's sign in the background. It showed me and my mom. I remember my grandparents were the ones taking the photos. My mom hardly ever took photos with me. It seemed she had no intention of taking a photo that day, but after being reminded that these moments are worth capturing, she reluctantly agreed to the photo. Neither of us were smiling. I looked tense, and my mom had a sulky pout. There was an awkward distance between us, making it look like two strangers were uncomfortably posing together.
Oh, this girl is...
Before my grandparents could finish, the sound of the front door being roughly slid open echoed through the house. She must have noticed a pair of men's shoes that weren't my grandfather's. The sound of footsteps approached quickly. I hadn't expected her to come today. I frowned, unable to predict her behavior. My grandparents, who hadn't been informed of her visit, were surprised by the sudden noise. She just had to come and ruin our peaceful moment.
Diane, I've told you to open the door more gently.
Oh my, who's this? Grandmother was trying to caution Mom in the living room, but she wasn't really listening. Instead, she started sizing up Kevin, who was sitting next to me.
Oh, I'm Kevin Owen, Jane's boyfriend.
He introduced himself, though he looked a bit confused. I'm Diane, Jane's mom.
You're her mom?
I bet he was caught off guard by how young she looked, his eyes going wide. But my mom, she was giving him the side eye, studying him like a snake, getting ready to attack.
What are you doing? Stop it. It's rude to stare at someone you're meeting for the first time.
But she didn't listen and kept staring. And there was something about her behavior that gave me a terrible feeling. It couldn't possibly be that she, as a mother, was assessing whether I was suitable for her daughter. That greeting she gave to Kevin earlier was so cringeworthy. It was like she wanted him to see her as a woman, not a mom. I had to resist the urge to step in between them. It's okay. Kevin is trustworthy, so no need to be weird about it. I repeated this to myself several times to maintain my composure. However, a few days after the greeting, the unthinkable happened.
I'm sorry. I want to call off our engagement. I can't marry you, Jane.
I was relaxing in my room when he called, and without even a hello, he dropped this bombshell. My mind went blank. Why? I kept mumbling, but he just kept apologizing and avoiding my questions. I can't accept this all of a sudden. Let's meet and talk about it. All I got back was an apology.
I'm sorry. Please don't contact me anymore. I'll be deleting your contact information too.
And with that, he hung up on me. Even as I tried to continue the conversation, trying to call him back only resulted in a cold, automated tone. It seemed I was blocked instantly. After a year of dating and a proposal, it was over just like that. I covered myself with a blanket and cried into my pillow. 2 months later, I received a postcard from my mother. It wasn't the season for Christmas cards, and she had never sent me anything before. Not even a message. And yet, here was a postcard, something that requires effort. What? Why? It was an invitation to a wedding reception. It wouldn't be strange for my mother to marry someone, but the problem was with whom. The name written was that of my former fiancé. I desperately hoped it was someone with the same name. Immediately, I called my mom.
Hi, hello? Did the invitation arrive okay?
She picked up right away, which was rare, considering she hardly ever answered my calls unless she knew it was me calling. It arrived, but Kevin Owen?
Oh, yes, your ex-boyfriend. I saw him and just had to have him, so I took him. Sorry.
She didn't care at all and just stomped all over my heart with her words. Apparently, while I was in the bathroom that day, she had secretly asked for his contact information.
As a mom, I just wanted to be informed if anything happened to my daughter.
That's how she got him to exchange numbers. What does it mean to be a mom anyway? She hardly had any sense of it despite claiming otherwise. And so, after some aggressive pursuit from my mother, Kevin fell for her.
Oh, you have to come to the reception, okay? Don't want any empty seats.
After saying that, satisfied, she hung up. Any lingering feelings I had vanished, or rather I was forced to let them go. There was no way he was coming back to me. After calming down a bit, I decided to go to my grandparents' house. Being alone at home only made me feel more depressed, and I thought being with someone might help distract me even a little. My grandparents seemed to notice right away that something was different about me. Upon entering, they served coffee and the usual cookies. As I took a bite, tears began to flow uncontrollably. Remembering the conversation about these cookies with him made me break down. My grandparents comforted me, rubbing my back until I stopped crying. This is what I received from Mom. After I was finally able to talk about it, I showed them the postcard and told them about the phone call. It seemed they hadn't received one, and their expressions turned to shock.
I can't believe it. Diane, what a terrible thing to do. It must have been hard for you. We also have to take some responsibility for letting things get this far with her.
They muttered in a low, angry voice, and then peered into my face and nodded firmly.
It's okay. Leave the rest to us. We'll go instead. Yes, we'll go and create a wonderful surprise for our daughter.
They told me about what happened at the reception when they returned. Dressed in formal attire, they headed to the venue and presented the postcard I received, mentioning their names to the staff. The staff was puzzled because their names were not on the guest list. It turned out the staff went to check with my mom, the bride. Despite their names not being planned as part of the event, she allowed their attendance, thinking it would be nice for her parents to see.
I'm sorry, but we only have one available seat.
That seat was probably intended for me, not reserved for family members, but apparently as a guest of Kevin, the groom.
No, that's fine. Only my wife will sit.
Despite the staff's concern about making an elderly gentleman stand, my grandfather insisted that no additional seat was necessary. They had no intention of staying for the entire reception. My grandmother sat down and my grandfather stood behind her, surrounded by friends and work colleagues of the bride and groom. My mom's kind of a player, so she doesn't have any female friends. That's why the guest list is mostly guys. Shortly after the reception began, a video started playing on the screen, surprising everyone as it was not part of the planned program.
This is not listed on the schedule, but we have a surprise video from the bride's parents.
The bride and groom looked shocked and tried to stop it, but ended up watching as it started immediately. The video showcased my growth from a baby to adulthood, moving attendees to sniffle with emotion. However, the video abruptly changed and the sentimental background music stopped, replaced with silent footage of my mother entering a hotel with a man. Scene after scene followed, each with a different man. It turned out my mother had relationships with multiple men besides Kevin. My grandmother compiled evidence into a surprise video.
What is this? Stop it! Turn off the video now!
She screamed hysterically, but the video kept playing. The celebratory atmosphere turned icy as people stared.
What the hell? You were sleeping around with other men besides me?
Kevin, who never raised his voice during our relationship, confronted her loudly. I was shocked to hear this. The situation already resembling a disaster worsened as the men my mother had affairs with, shown in the video, stormed in and started berating her. Unable to watch any longer, one guest opened the door to leave, and others followed suit, leaving the venue. My grandparents took this opportunity to leave as well.
I can't believe this happened!
Her anguished cry was heard as the door closed, but my grandparents didn't look back. Afterward, the remaining guests also left, effectively ending the reception. After that incident, Kevin and Diane's relationship turned sour, leading to their breakup.
I never thought Diane was that kind of person. Why did I choose her over you?
He contacted me once he unblocked me, but I sharply replied, Aren't you a bit late in realizing that? Normally, one would immediately understand that a mom who makes moves on her own daughter's fiancé is no good. My words really hit Kevin hard. However, things only got worse for him from there. The fact that Kevin had switched from his fiancée, me, to my mom became known at his workplace. The bosses and younger workers used to really like him, but now they think he's a letdown, so he had to quit his job. I have since blocked his number, ensuring he can't contact me again. And Diane has found herself in an even worse situation. Among the men she was involved with, there was a married man whose wife is now demanding compensation from Diane. Also, Diane had mentioned the idea of marrying single guys, scamming them out of their money and presents, and now she's been sued for essentially deceiving them. She thought about asking my grandparents for help, but they had already cut ties with her.
Never involve us in your life again. We will not take care of you. If you come to our house uninvited, we will call the police.
They sternly warned her and took back her keys. Of course, I have her number blocked as well. The last time I saw Diane, she had aged significantly, looking not only her age, but perhaps a decade older. To reassure my grandparents, I'm trying to live positively. I've learned to be more careful with love, but I still have hope of finding someone I can trust and eventually tie the knot with.